My girlfriend dumped me, convinced she was out of my league after her big promotion, believing she deserved someone better. But the very next day, she came crawling back, pleading for another chance because the guy she left me for kicked her to the curb. And now, she's resorting to threats, saying she'll harm herself if I don't take her back. Hey everyone, great to have you back. I've got a fresh story for you today, so let's jump right in. Amanda and I have been together for 4 years, and for the longest time, I thought what we had was real, solid, even. We met back in college, back when neither of us had much except big dreams and long nights running on cheap ramen and caffeine. She was the driven, outgoing type, always talking about the future and the heights she wanted to reach. I was more easygoing, content with a stable life and the little things that made it worthwhile. That difference never seemed like an issue. She used to tell me she loved how I grounded her, how I was her calm in the storm of her ambitions. And I believed her. For years, our relationship felt effortless, nights spent watching movies, long drives where we didn't even need to talk, and small traditions that felt like they belonged to just us. But looking back now, I can see the cracks had been forming long before everything fell apart. Things started shifting when Amanda landed a major promotion. I was happy for her, proud, even. She had worked hard for it, and she absolutely deserved the recognition. But along with that promotion came new responsibilities, a different social circle, and, almost overnight, a complete change in how she lived her life. Suddenly, there were business dinners, late-night meetings, and networking events that kept her out later than usual. At first, I didn't think anything of it. She was just settling into her new role, after all. But little things started adding up. She became more critical, not in any obvious, mean-spirited way, but in small, dismissive remarks. She'd make comments about my clothes, suggesting I should put more effort into how I presented myself. Then, it was my job. She'd talk about how ambitious and driven everyone at her company was, how they were constantly pushing for more, while my career in IT, though stable, lacked that same hunger for success. I brushed it off, thinking she was just caught up in the excitement of her new position. Then came Dylan. Dylan was one of her colleagues, and from everything she told me, he was the picture of confidence and success. Always sharply dressed, full of advice, the kind of guy who could own any room he walked into. At first, I didn't think much of it. I wasn't the jealous type, and I trusted Sophie. But gradually, the way she talked about him started to change. His name popped up more and more, slipping into conversations that had nothing to do with work. She admired how bold he was, how he carried himself like he knew his worth, how he never settled for less than he deserved. Then, the comparison started, subtle at first, almost offhand. She'd casually mention how sharp Dylan always looked, how men in powerful positions carried themselves with confidence, and how truly successful people never settled for less. At first, it seemed like harmless admiration. But soon, those observations started shifting, no longer just about him, but about me. She started hinting that I should push harder in my career, that I had more potential than I was using. It was never an outright insult, but the message was clear. I wasn't enough as I was. When I told her I was happy with my job and the life we had built, she let out this long, disappointed sigh, like I had missed some unspoken expectation. And then, little by little, she started to pull away. Date nights became rare. And when we did manage to go out, she wasn't really there. Her attention was always on her phone, her mind somewhere else. If I asked what was wrong, she'd brush it off, saying she was just tired or stressed. But I knew better. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. The closeness, the affection, the easy intimacy we once had, it all started to fade. One night, after weeks of canceled plans and empty conversations, we finally sat down for dinner at home. I wanted to talk, really talk, to figure out what was going on between us. I thought maybe we just needed to reconnect. But the conversation took a turn I never saw coming. She told me she felt like we were growing apart, that we wanted different things. I just sat there, blindsided. We had always been a team, always supported each other. And now she was acting like we were strangers walking separate paths. I asked her what had changed. She hesitated, searching for the right words, before finally admitting she wasn't sure if we were aligned anymore. It made no sense. Just a few months ago, we were making plans, talking about the future, considering moving in together, building something real. And now, out of nowhere, she wasn't sure? I pressed for answers, trying to understand what was happening, but she kept everything vague. She wasn't unhappy, but she wasn't excited either. I hadn't done anything wrong, but somehow, she still felt like she was outgrowing our relationship. And when I asked the one question that had been gnawing at me, if there was someone else, she immediately got defensive. Told me I was overthinking. That of course there was nothing going on. I wanted to believe her. A few weeks later, she ended it. Sat me down and told me she had been thinking about this for a while. She said she didn't want to hurt me, but she needed to see what else was out there. That she had changed. And she couldn't pretend to be the same person she was when we started. The words hit like a gut punch. She kept repeating that she still cared about me, but she wanted more. She needed to be with someone who matched her ambition and drive. She never said it outright, but I knew exactly what she meant. She didn't see me as good enough anymore. No fight. No yelling. No dramatic argument. Just cold, clinical detachment. It was like she had already made peace with it long before she ever said the words out loud. Maybe she had. And just like that, she left. The next day, I was still trying to wrap my head around everything, still trying to understand how someone I had loved for 4 years could walk away so effortlessly. Part of me wanted to believe she was just confused, that maybe she needed space to realize what we had was worth holding on to. Then, not even 24 hours later, she was at my door. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her whole body trembling. She didn't look anything like the confident woman who had so easily told me the night before that she had outgrown me. Her voice was unsteady as she told me she had made a mistake. She begged me to take her back. And that's when the truth came out. When I first opened the door and saw Amanda standing there, I almost thought I was imagining it. Less than a day ago, she had looked me straight in the eye and told me she deserved more, that she was moving on to bigger and better things, that I wasn't enough. And now, here she was. For a moment, we just stood there in silence. Then, her voice cracked as she started speaking, telling me she had been so wrong about everything. She had made a mistake. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, listening. Then I asked her, what happened? That's when it all spilled out. After leaving my place, she had gone straight to a party with her coworkers, the same people she had been prioritizing over me for months. She had expected to feel free, independent, like she was finally stepping into the life she had always imagined for herself. Instead, she felt nothing. Dylan, the guy who had spent months whispering in her ear, making her question our relationship, barely even acknowledged her. A quick hello, a nod in her direction, and that was it. She had assumed that now that she was single, now that she had done what he had subtly been encouraging her to do, he would finally show interest. That there would be some kind of moment between them. But there wasn't. She tried to get his attention, laughing at his jokes, agreeing with his opinions, making it clear she was available. But he barely reacted. It was as if the moment she was no longer in a relationship, she lost whatever appeal she once had in his eyes. Eventually, she stopped dancing around it and told him directly, I'm single now. She expected something, some kind of response, a shift in his demeanor, a sign that he had been waiting for this. Instead, he just laughed, brushed it off, then turned away and started talking to someone else. And that's when it hit her. He had never been serious. The months of subtle comments, the flirty nudges, the way he made her feel like she was destined for something bigger, it had all been a game to him. Nothing more. The realization crashed over her like a wave of cold humiliation. Feeling sick to her stomach, she walked away from Dylan's group and tried to collect herself on the other side of the room. That's when a few of her other coworkers noticed her red, puffy eyes and asked if she was okay. Still shaken, she confided in them. She told them everything, how she had broken up with me, how she had convinced herself Dylan was interested, how she had thought she was stepping into something better, and then how he had dismissed her without a second thought, like she was nothing. And they laughed, not in a cruel way, but in disbelief. One of them, a woman Amanda had always seen as friendly but blunt, just shook her head and told her flat out that Dylan had always been like that. He had a habit of making people feel special, but it never actually meant anything. That was just who he was. A guy who enjoyed playing with people's emotions for his own amusement. Then, almost as an afterthought, another coworker casually mentioned that Dylan was married. Amanda froze. She asked if they were joking, but they just shrugged. No, he wasn't happily married, but he was definitely off the market. Everyone in the office knew. They had just assumed she knew too. And in that moment, it all came crashing down on her. She had thrown away a 4-year relationship for nothing. And now, she was here, standing at my door, begging me to take her back. She kept saying how wrong she had been, how she had let herself be influenced by the wrong people, that she had convinced herself she wanted something bigger, something better, when in reality, she had already had everything she needed. She swore she had never stopped loving me. That she had been blinded by stupid ideas, by the pressure of those around her, by this false belief that she was missing out on something. She promised she would do anything to fix it, that we could go back to how things were. I let her talk. I listened to every word. And all I could think about was how easily she had left me in the first place. How quickly she had decided I wasn't enough. How, just yesterday, she had looked at me with pity in her eyes, convinced she had outgrown me. And now? Now she was here, pleading for another chance. Not because she had suddenly realized she loved me, but because she had failed to trade up. Because the fantasy she had built in her head shattered the moment she tested it. Because the guy she had imagined a future with didn't even see her. I told her I needed time to think. Not because I was considering taking her back, but because I needed space to process everything that had just happened. She left, still crying, still pleading. And I just sat there, staring at the spot where she had been standing, trying to make sense of it all. I should feel relieved, right? Like I dodged a bullet. Like I won. But I don't. I just feel empty. For years. For years of loving someone, supporting them, believing we were building something real, something lasting. And she threw it all away, just like that. All because of a few words from a guy who didn't even care enough to acknowledge her when it actually mattered. Now, she wants to undo it. To erase it. To act like none of this ever happened, as if she never looked me in the eyes and told me I wasn't enough. But how do I do that? How do I look at her the same way again? How do I trust someone who tossed me aside the second she thought she had something better? How do I pretend yesterday didn't happen, that the doubt, the hurt, and the betrayal don't exist? I don't have the answers. I still love her. Or at least, I think I do. But love isn't enough, not when respect is gone, when trust has been shattered. I just needed to get this off my chest because, right now, I feel like I'm drowning in it. Update. I wish I could say things settled down after that. That I got some closure, quietly moved on, and started rebuilding my life. But life doesn't always work that way. Amanda didn't just take my rejection and move on. No, she escalated. And now, I'm sitting here bracing for a potential lawsuit, dealing with her enraged parents, and trying to figure out how to defend myself in case she or her family decides to go nuclear. Let me start from where things went completely off the rails. After I rejected her, I genuinely thought that was it. I assumed she'd be upset, maybe even devastated, but that eventually, she'd accept it, process it, and move on. That's what people do, right? Apparently, not Sophie. About a week after our last conversation, I woke up to a long, rambling text from her. She told me she had quit her job. Not just put in her 2 weeks. Not transferred departments. She had completely walked away from her entire career. The same career she had once prioritized over me. The same career she had chased so fiercely that she let it come between us. She said she couldn't stand being around those people anymore. Couldn't bear to see the faces of the ones who had given her that painful reality check. She needed a fresh start, and she was hoping that now I'd reconsider, that I'd see how serious she was about making things right. I just stared at my phone, rereading her message over and over, trying to wrap my head around it. She had thrown away everything she once valued for the sake of proving a point. And yet, I felt nothing. No sympathy. No satisfaction. No second thoughts. I didn't reply right away. I needed time to process it. But before I could even decide what to say, more messages started flooding in. At first, it was more the same. She kept saying she had given up everything for me, that she was willing to start over, that we could make things work if I just gave her a chance. That all of this, her quitting, her desperation, her regret, was proof of how much she loved me. But when I still didn't respond, the tone of her messages changed. They became darker. At first, it was guilt-tripping. She said she had nothing left, that she was lost without me, that she didn't know how to move forward. Then, she started saying things that made my stomach drop. She told me she couldn't live like this, that she didn't see a future without me, that she was afraid of what she might do if I didn't at least talk to her. I froze. This wasn't just a desperate ex trying to win me back. This was serious. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. The moment I saw those messages, I knew I couldn't just ignore them. No matter how much she had hurt me, I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen them. What if she really did something drastic? So, I reached out to one of her close friends, someone I knew she still trusted. I forwarded the messages, explained that I wasn't trying to start drama but that I was genuinely worried about her. Her friend thanked me and promised to check in on her. I thought that would be the end of it. But I was wrong. A day later, I got a call from her parents. Not a polite, concerned call. Not a "we're worried about our daughter" call. No, this was rage. Apparently, Amanda had twisted the entire situation, making it sound like I had led her on, like I had manipulated her into quitting her job, and then abandoned her when she had nothing left. She painted herself as the victim, and me as the heartless villain who broke her. Her mother was sobbing. Her father was furious. They accused me of playing with her emotions, of taking advantage of her love for me, of ruining her. And then came the real kicker. They hinted that they were considering legal action. For what? I had no idea. Emotional distress? Psychological damage? I didn't do anything to her. She made her own choices. She was the one who left me. And yet, here I was, suddenly the bad guy. Right now, I'm waiting. Waiting to see what move Sophie or her parents will make next. I've started keeping records of everything. Screenshots of her messages. Notes from our conversations. Anything that proves I haven't done a damn thing wrong. Because if this turns into some twisted attempt to ruin my life, I need to be ready. I never wanted this. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to be left alone. I should feel relieved. Like I dodged a bullet. Like I won. But I don't. I just feel tired. And maybe, more than anything else, I just feel done. I didn't want to take any chances. I wasn't about to sit back and hope for the best, not when things had escalated this far. So, I called the authorities. I handed over all the messages, every desperate text, every veiled threat, every guilt trip she had sent me. I explained everything, told them I had no idea what she might do, but that I was genuinely concerned. They found her at her apartment, in the middle of a full breakdown. And because of the severity of her threats, she was placed under psychiatric hold for evaluation. That should have been the end of it. That should have been where she got the help she needed. But then her parents got involved. 2 days later, they showed up at my doorstep. I had barely slept. My mind had been racing, replaying every moment of the past few weeks, trying to make sense of how things had spiraled so wildly out of control. I was drained, physically and mentally. And then I opened the door and was met with pure rage. Her parents were furious. They weren't concerned. They weren't looking for answers. They were looking for someone to blame. And in their eyes, that someone was me. They accused me of everything. That I had emotionally abused their daughter. That I had led her on. That I had strung her along just to reject her when she was at her lowest. That my actions had pushed her over the edge. I tried to stay calm. I really did. But they weren't interested in listening. They shouted over me, their anger rising with every accusation. They said I had ruined her life. That if anything happened to her, it would be my fault. And then they dropped the final bombshell. They were considering taking legal action against me. For emotional distress. For abuse. I stood there, barely able to process what I was hearing. After everything their daughter had done, after all the ways she had hurt me, they had the audacity to act like I was the villain in this story. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and told them the truth. That their daughter was in this situation because of her own choices. That I had loved her, supported her, and been by her side for 4 years until she decided I wasn't enough. That she threw me away for a fantasy. And that when she was at her lowest, when she needed help, I was the one who called for it. I saved her life. And instead of thanking me, they were threatening me. Her mother started crying. Her father was still red with anger, fists clenched at his sides, but I could see something flicker in his expression, hesitation. Maybe, deep down, some part of him knew I was right. Maybe he just didn't want to admit that his daughter wasn't the victim they had convinced themselves she was. But at that point, I didn't care anymore. I had nothing left to say. So, I shut the door in their faces. And the moment the lock clicked, I broke down. I sat there, staring at the floor, my mind completely numb. I never wanted this. I never wanted to be in a situation where I had to defend myself against someone I once loved. I never thought I'd have to gather evidence just to prove I wasn't the bad guy. But here I was. I had everything saved. Her texts, her confessions, her threats, her desperate messages. And now, proof that I was the one who called for help when she was in distress. If her parents tried to take this to court, if they really thought they could drag me down with them, I was ready to fight back. I didn't want to destroy her. I didn't want to make her suffer. But I wasn't about to let her, or her family, ruin my life over their own delusions. Right now, I'm trying to get in touch with her ex-co-workers, the ones who had given her that brutal reality check about Dylan. If this does end up in court, I need their statements. I need proof that she was already spiraling before I even rejected her. That this wasn't some elaborate scheme of mine. That her downfall was entirely her own doing. Because I know how this kind of thing works. If they want to paint me as the bad guy, They will twist everything to fit their narrative. They will say I manipulated her, that I led her on, that I made her believe she had a future with me, only to rip it away out of spite. And that's not the truth. The truth is, she built her own false reality. She convinced herself that she was meant for something greater, that she had outgrown me, that she was destined for a better life, until she wasn't. And now that she's facing the consequences of her own choices, she's looking for someone else to blame. What happens next? I don't know. Maybe her parents will follow through with their threats and actually file a lawsuit. Maybe this will all blow over and Amanda will finally let go. I hope she finds peace. I really do. I want her to be okay. But if she, or her family, tries to drag me down with her, I will fight back with everything I have. I never asked for this nightmare. I just wanted to love someone. And now, I'm dealing with the fallout of a disaster I never created. For now, all I can do is wait and try to breathe. What a story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Share your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next one.